Hey, to all the real estate professionals out there, I want to let you know the Buyer's Mind is sponsored by Homebridge Financial. Homebridge loan officers are experts in new home financing, and they bring sales ideas and strategies and market intelligence and programs that will help sell homes. To learn more about that, go to builder.homebridge.com. Homebridge Financial, home financing made easy. So how creative are you? Well, if you're in the world of sales, you better be plenty creative. Let's get into it today on The Buyer's Mind.
Welcome to The Buyer's Mind, where we take a closer look deep inside your customer's decision-making mechanism to reverse engineer the perfect sales presentation. Now, please welcome your host, Jeff Shore.
Well, greetings, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Buyer's Mind. I am your host, Jeff Shore, and this is the podcast where we really get into the idea of how do our customers think? How do we think? How do we make sure we make it easy for people to do what they want to do anyway? And, you know, when we think about our role as sales professionals, there are a lot of attributes that we have to have, right? Positive energy is going to be really a critical attribute. Certainly wisdom and intelligence about our product, about the world around us, about our competition. These are all very, very important. But today we're going to look at a very specific attribute called creativity. And when we think about creativity, it manifests in a lot of different ways. But as we get into that, as we think that through, it's really, really critical. And perhaps it's overlooked much of the time. Joined, as always, by our show producer, Paul Murphy. Murph, do you consider yourself to be a creative guy?
You know, I've been struggling with that question more lately. I do a lot of technical stuff between the editing and putting things together. But yeah, I think all of us have a little bit of a creative bent. It's just a matter of how we apply it.
Yeah, I think that that's true. I think that there's a scale that everybody has creativity in them. We tend to look at people who are very outgoing and flamboyant, the artist types, and say, well, they're very creative. But I don't know. I'm not so sure that we've got that right. I think creativity can come in all kinds of shapes and sizes. And even if I look at somebody who's working in a lab asking the question, what is this problem over here? And how exactly do we approach it? What if we did it this way? Well, that takes a lot of creative genius to rethink the way that you've always done something. And so I think that creativity is going to be really critical. And we want to get into that today as we talk to Andy Paul. Now, Andy and I, we've known each other for years. He's just one of the really great sales thinkers, the host of the Accelerate podcast. And we were talking about that, about the idea of creativity and what it means. And it's a great conversation because it leads us into the idea of how do we build that creative muscle. Let's hear from Andy Paul. Well, I'm thrilled to have back on The Buyer's Mind the great Andy Paul. I say he's great because he's just a great guy. He's also a really, really smart sales thinker. He's one of the best sales thinkers out there. He is the host of the Accelerate Sales podcast over many years, several books out there, and all kinds of online programs through the Sales House. Of course, we're going to put all that in the show notes. But more than anything, he's just a really, really good guy to spend time with. Andy Paul, welcome back to The Buyer's Mind.
Jeff, thank you for having me back.
Yeah, I know it's always fun. You started your podcast, the Accelerate podcast, way back when, before anybody else was doing it. I mean, you've got one of the oldest sales podcasts on the books.
Well, it's been 4.5 years. So yeah.
Well, that's in podcast years. That's a long time.
It's like dog years, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, let's see. This week, I think we just put out episode 753.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's great. And, you know, it's one of those things about podcasts that's really interesting is that, you know, you look and you go, well, you got to line up the guests and you got to do all of the recording and the editing and all of that, the marketing and all around that. But the fact of the matter is you wouldn't be doing it at this point in your very illustrious career if you didn't absolutely love it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's, as I tell people, it's the most selfish thing I've ever done because it's given me the excuse to talk to roughly 750 really smart people about sales, leadership, management. I've learned and taken away as much as people that are in the audience.
Right, right. When you look at sales and general and your career in sales over time, I'm sure there's been a lot of evolution, but is there an area that you look at and say, you know what, this is something that I'm pretty darn passionate about, or that I think I have a pretty strong aptitude towards? Is there one area of sales that you really tend to focus in on?
Well, I mean, before I started my own company, I was selling large enterprise communication systems, so satellite communication systems to big companies around the world. But sort of the twist on it, though, is I was doing it for startups. So we were startups selling huge infrastructure projects against big name, established technology companies, and that sort of became my sweet spot. Was, yeah, we know how to win in those situations. And so, we were taking deals sometimes that were multiples of our revenue as a company. Yeah, it required a lot of creativity and credibility to be able to get that done.
Mm-hmm. And when you look at that creativity and credibility, especially on the creativity side, I think one thing that people don't quite understand is how important your short-term problem-solving skills are in the world of sales. Because let's face it, in sales, so much of our life, I don't want to say we're making stuff up. That wouldn't be the right way to characterize it, but we're ad-libbing. We're improvising a lot.
Absolutely.
We're taking a situation we've never heard before and having to say to a client, well, I think you should do this. And you got to have both the wisdom and the confidence to be able to do that. Maybe that's what prevents a lot of people from succeeding in the sales business in the first place.
Well, I think it does, because when you use the word improv, is that oftentimes gets interpreted by people listening and saying, well, geez, I think I can talk my way out of any situation, so I must be good at improv. And the fact is, if you look at actors and comedians that came out of the improv world, it's a highly developed skill to be able to react in the moment and come up with something that's creative and funny and so on. And it's similar in sales. I mean, this is not, hey, I'm going to make it up as I go. This is, I'm leaning on my experience. I'm leaning on the skills I have in order to be responsive and in the moment in a way that's appropriate to help the buyer. And being flexible, adaptable, hugely important, and being creative. Ultimately, sales is a creative endeavor.
It really, really is. And it's funny because when you look at it, as you explore that idea of improv on the fly, if you're in improv, and look, I have just a little bit of theater arts background, but certainly can't say that I could hold my own in an improv troupe. I don't think I could. But when I look at that, it's not just having the right solution, but it's also the sensitivity to the tone and the timing and the delivery and the way that you're interacting with your partner there. So even as a salesperson, what I have seen is that somebody may have the right answer, but it's delivered poorly, and then it doesn't really matter. We're going to lose all the credibility in the answer.
Yeah, and it's a matter of what you're aiming for. And this is, to me, is really one of the real big things I'm spending more and more time thinking about is, we're training salespeople to focus on the wrong thing. And I think it's getting amplified by the way we're using the technology within sales. Is that, if you remember, Gartner a couple of years ago put out this buyer enablement study, and they had this chart they put up. It was this spaghetti, what they call spaghetti diagram, very complex flow chart for how buyers walk through the decision-making process. And it's not a linear stage-based process like a sales process. It comprises 4 jobs that need to get done. But like I said, they call it the spaghetti diagram because it's all these lines going everywhere. It's like you took a handful of cooked spaghetti and threw it on the wall. But they identified these 4 jobs buyers have to get done. Buyers have to get done: identify the problem, research possible solutions, build the requirements, select a vendor. And what we're doing is we're training everybody to focus on select a vendor, where all the action takes place, and the first 3 jobs, and how they define how they're going to get their problem solved. And that's where we need to be focusing salespeople, is how do you help the buyer define how they're going to solve their problem or achieve their desired outcomes. And if you do that, then when you get to that vendor selection stage, you're in the catbird seat.
Do you believe that there has been a fundamental shift in that regard since the evolution of the internet really took hold and the ubiquity of information that's out there really would have changed the salesperson's job, is to look at it and say it's no longer just about disseminating information, but now that salesperson's job by necessity has to be elevated into that sense of partnership? I know that's not everybody's going to agree with that. Is that your take?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that it's so easy to default into this idea that buyers are self-educated and yada, yada, yada. But if you're selling anything that's not transactional with any level of complexity, they need your help. They want your help. And when you look at this Gartner chart, unfortunately, you could sort of play Where's Waldo on it. And I've done this with groups. As I said, find the word sales on this chart because it only shows up once. And it's buried in a lower right-hand corner. But that reflects the fact that buyers typically don't find value in the interactions with the sellers, right? They don't have the acumen, the business smarts to be able to say, yeah, okay, you've got this problem. Let's think about how we can solve that, right? And so as a consequence, they're not really assuming they're going to need sellers. But if you're the right seller, they want you, they need you, and you're going to position yourself extremely well by being able to work with them.
Yeah, it is interesting when we look at yes, there is a lot of information out there. There's no question. And my take on it is that buyers are self-educated to an extent. But if they were self-educated enough to buy, they probably wouldn't be talking to a salesperson. There are simply too many options out there right now where I can bypass the salesperson. So by the very nature of the fact that they're having a conversation, it's kind of a clue, right? I don't know what to do next. Now you can pick it up from here.
I think people very rarely wake up in the morning and think, I'd love to talk to a salesperson today. I just don't think that happens, right? It doesn't mean they don't like you once they get to know you and so on, but yeah, it's not at the top of their list. And if they could get their job done without it and feel that confident that they got made the right decision, sure. But I think the desire and the need to speak with sales in large part comes from people trying to mitigate their own risk, right? How do I validate these potential options I have? How do I know these are the right options for me to consider? Yeah, I can sort of look at it objectively, but it sure be great to talk to somebody that has some expertise in this to help me.
Let's talk about the coaching that you've done with salespeople, because I know you've done a lot of one-on-one coaching here in the past. We're talking to Andy Paul. You can follow him on andypaul.com. You can also look at the Sales House, which is a great online resource for salespeople. Andy, you've done a lot of work with salespeople one-on-one, and one of the things that we know is that salespeople tend to be more of the passionate ilk. They are certainly in touch with the emotional side, but they're also human beings. And so when we get into that conversation where we're dealing with a difficult buyer, we're dealing with somebody who is difficult to deal with, they're emotional in a negative way. And it naturally triggers, because we're human beings, it naturally triggers on an emotional sense or perhaps even a threat sensitivity that would take me off of the game that is going to really be most effective here that needs to be played. So what counseling, what coaching do you give to salespeople when it comes to dealing with difficult people or buyers who are bringing you negative energy?
It's that is such an individual answer because it has to do with the person themselves, the seller themselves. And so I'll just relate a story about what I've typically done over the years, and it fits me as a person. If I'm dealing with somebody who's a difficult buyer, and I tend to tease them. I tend to try to prick their bubble of self-importance, and so. But that fits my personality. I've got sort of this wry, sarcastic sense of humor, and it's worked wonderfully for me. Is I get people to stop feeling so self-important. We're just people. We're dealing on this. You're no more important than I am. Let's talk on a human level and let's get this done. But that's not going to work for everybody, right? So
but the approach says first and foremost that you are not going to control the emotional tone of this conversation.
No, I mean, it's just, people, I have no control over my buyers. I mean, I've always sort of raged against this idea that we control our buyers. We don't. But, we can sort of try to level the playing field a little bit. And so that was always just a big thing for me is I didn't want people talking down to me. I didn't care who they were, so on. And so that was just the way I would find a way early in the first conversation to send a shot. Kind of passive aggressive, but it worked, and people stopped taking themselves less seriously. But again, that's not going to be for everyone. So I try to work with the individual. Say, well, what's going to happen for you in this scenario? And generally it's taking the high road. Is that if you just refuse to rise to the bait, eventually people will give up on trying to bait you. And that's what a lot of that behavior is, right? Somebody's trying to assert themselves in a dominant sort of way and just don't take it. And I again find that's also very successful. Sometimes you have to do that. One example of a company, a big deal, we're working on a very big deal, one of the biggest deals this company had ever taken, and we were just being hammered by the VP of operations over a point of quality control, and I just wouldn't rise to the bait, and eventually he just gave up, trying to bait us. And I think he was favoring one of our competitors, so he's trying to bait me into making a mistake or say something that they could use against it, and just don't rise to it, and eventually gave up.
Right. Well, listen, if you've got a buyer who's got that edge to them, that difficult to them, it's possible that they're coming at you with their own version of fear. And the fear might very well be that I've not had the best experiences with sales professionals in the past. And so, we're bringing in that they're almost looking to initiate their confirmation bias to see if you are going to be like all of the other worthless people that I have in my mind. So, right.
Well, it's funny that I remember the story. I saw an interview with Jerry Seinfeld within the last few years, and his father was a salesperson. And he tells the story about his father. His father had this game he liked to play with customers. If it was, he ran into a difficult customer, and he wasn't reasonably sure he wasn't going to get any business out of him. Nonetheless, he had played this game. I think he called it Happy Faces. He would do anything to get the person to smile. And so he'd play this game with himself. It's, I'm not even going to get business, but I'm going to spend a few minutes just to see if I can get a rise out of this person.
Right.
I thought that was great, because I thought, I've done that in the past. I mean, somebody I know, they're going to kick me out of the office, but in the meantime, I'm going to have some fun with this.
Right. Yeah. Well, because the worst case scenario is that they're negative, you go negative. Guess what? It's a zero-sum game. You both lost. Right.
Yeah. So I'll go positive. I'll try to do something to provoke them. But So, but those are days where we were doing, 30, 40 cold calls a day in person or out in the field. You were in those days too. It's like, a lot of that gets masked when you've got somebody on the phone, because they just seem abrupt or whatever. But when you see them in person, you got this body language thing, and you can see their face, and you can see they don't really want me here at all. Yeah. It's like, what can I do? It's interesting and creative today.
And let me just pause here real quick for a quick word about our sponsor, NoviHome. Well, this podcast is sponsored by NoviHome. NoviHome is a digital sales and marketing tool that gives your new home sales team everything they need for powerful follow-up. In our changing environment, NoviHome allows you to engage buyers when you're not face-to-face. NoviHome offers your buyers a phenomenal digital buying experience that is personalized for your company. NoviHome also takes all of your marketing materials and plugs it into your branded builder app. NoviHome's analytics give your sales team real-time insight into which leads are engaging and exactly what they are looking at, which enables powerful follow-up. Visit NoviHome.com to schedule a demonstration today. That's NoviHome.com. Listeners of this podcast will save 10% on the monthly service. All right, back into our topic now. Now, you just said the C word, which is the time of this recording still means coronavirus, but you use the cold calling word. Andy, you and I are a part of the same tribe of sales thinkers and authors and speakers. And even in the tribe, there has been an ongoing debate about whether cold calling is dead, whether that's something that belongs in a different era. What's your take on cold calling?
Well, I mean, it depends on your definition, but as long as you prepare, I mean, I think outbound prospecting is hugely important. I mean, I think maybe for different, I don't subscribe to perhaps all the theories that some people do about, hey, your average deal size is higher if it's a deal you develop yourself versus an inbound, or, proclivity to close is higher. But, we haven't sort of perfected the whole lead gen thing where, we get all this, I get a bunch of leads that are specifically tailored to what we need, and these are great prospects, and they're all.
We know the demographic in this zip code, and
that's utopia. But we don't live in utopia. So as depending on how your sales team is structured, if you have prospecting responsibility yourself as well as full cycle sales, you got to make sure you've set your schedule up in such a way and done your preparation in such a way that you're targeting the accounts that you think would be the fit your ICP, that have the best potential for you, that you're doing that proactively. You gotta. I mean, you can't count on inbound.
Right. Yeah, I guess, and you're right. It does depend on the definition. I certainly, when I go back to my early days of sales, and this would have been real estate in the 1980s, so it was a different world. But sure enough, here's a reverse phone directory, which gives you phone numbers by streets. You open it up, you pick up the phone, you say, "Hey, are you thinking about selling your house?" And that's what you were forced to do. And I think that so many people today look at cold calling like that, like I'm just randomly dialing numbers and asking random questions, which is of course not the case. I mean, the opportunity that we have to learn at least a little bit about the person that we're about to call is pretty significant. I don't think most salespeople who have been minted in the last 15 years have any idea how much the internet has helped us to make proactive prospecting so much easier than it ever would have been in the past.
Oh yeah. Yeah. We had, was it Hoover's, I think, business directory?
Yeah. Hoover's. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And we were looking for prospects with a certain SIC code. Which was standardized industry code. Yeah. So we were targeting to some degree, right? Looking my territory. In my case, I was working based out of Oakland, California, in the East Bay, the San Francisco Bay Area. Yeah, and I would say, okay, I wanted to. Well, I was selling computers. I was selling to the construction trade. I was selling specifically to general contractors and infrastructure, kind of like road and so on. So there's an SIC code for that. I would do the research I could, and then, but we had no way to go online, look at press releases, look at jobs they'd done. We all subscribed to the local business journal, and we read that. But it took a little more work. Yeah, but we weren't. Sure. Yeah, we couldn't argue that we were precisely targeted as you could be today in terms of knowing who in that company you could call. But I was giving this story to people, to take it one step further though, is so when I was working for startups in the satellite industry for a number of years, I'd have to go cold call British Telecom from California to see who was the person to talk to at about satellite communications, specifically these types of satellite communications. I was doing it on the phone. From San Diego, long distance. At that time, long distance was very expensive. And it was like, that was cold calling. That was literally cold calling. I had no idea who was there, and so I'm calling, the national phone company of Britain at that time and saying, "Who can I talk to?" Right.
Yeah. How about that? You worked in Oakland. Where did you live when you were working in Oakland?
Initially, I lived right by Lake Merritt. Until I started having strangers walk into my apartment too frequently. And then I had a colleague that he was renting a house. Actually, it was in Berkeley, on the top Grizzly Peak Road, on the top of the Berkeley Hills. And we rented this house from a Berkeley professor and his wife. It was 4 of us lived there. It was this house with just an incredible view of San Francisco, the Golden Gate Bridge, the Bay Bridge. It was nice.
I love it. I love it.
Sort of party central too, but
you think the way you described it, I would think so.
I didn't mention the redwood stand up hot tub is, you stood in it. It was nice. Yeah.
Very nice. Very nice. And listen, I heard through the grapevine here that you've had some changes in regards to your podcast these days.
We have, we sold our podcast. We were acquired.
How about that? Yeah.
It's very exciting. And so we were teaming up with Ring DNA, who's based in the LA area in Sherman Oaks, and they're a leading sales enablement platform. Great product for sales teams that are doing great work for clients in this remote work environment. And we're going to be investing a lot into our podcast. We're going to sort of do a relaunch and a rebrand, refresh, if you will, let's say. Yeah. And even produce more episodes than we're doing now. And it's fabulous. I love the people there, the management team, very smart people, and they have a very common vision with me in terms of what sales is, what sales should be, right? How to best execute sales. And so the alignment is great, and we're very, very excited about it.
That's awesome. That's great. Look forward to hearing about those changes. One last thing, Andy. Here, let's just talk about how. Talk about how you take care of yourself. I know you're the type of person. We, as I mentioned, belong to the same tribe of people, sales thinkers and writers and authors and all of that. And there are some people in the tribe who are just like complete workaholics. You'll sleep when you die. That's the way it is. When I'm not working, what do I like to do? I like to work. And I don't think this describes either Jeff Shore or Andy Paul. Talk a little bit about just philosophically about your desire, your need really to take care of yourself and live life the right way.
It's a great question. Yeah, I've been exercise fanatic, if you will, pretty much my entire life, certainly in my adult life, and I've never sort of fallen off that wagon. So the fitness and exercise to me has been such an integral part of what I do and who I am, because I think it helps my performance and everything else I do. And so it's not just physical fitness. I think it contributes to the mental fitness as well. Spending 20 years running my own business before this recent sale of the podcast is I worked when I needed to, but sort of the joke among friends, we talk about the tribe, fellow sales authors and so on, is the joke when people call me is, so where's Andy Paul today? And they didn't mean where am I on business travel, but right. Where am I having fun?
Right. Yeah.
And I prioritize that. Is going out, and I may go on vacation. You and I both share a love of Maui. We spend a lot of time there. A typical day for me in Maui though is I'll wake up, my wife and I will go out and exercise, I'll go for a run, maybe we'll do a yoga class, eat breakfast, and then she's got a demanding job as well, as we'll just work for a couple hours till like noon. And then the rest of the day, it's to us. My first Mai Tais at lunch. So we just try to seamlessly blend it in a way that it's integrated in what we do, but it's not driving us.
But here's why I think that's so important, and part of this is, I'm going to channel Dan Sullivan, who founded the strategic coach movement, but the idea that if you are in a creative business, you and I are in a creative business. I believe that everybody listening to this podcast right now is in a creative business. The brain needs its rest. It needs to be able to disengage. And we start thinking, if you're entrepreneurial minded, if you want to be a successful salesperson, it's charge, go, go, go. And you better be cranking out all the time, income producing stuff. But isn't it so much better to rest your brain and go for the more higher value opportunities in life?
Well, yeah. Well, I think it sort of reflects the way I sold throughout my career, which was, I probably early in my career, probably scared the hell out of my manager because today I laugh, people talk about, we need 5x coverage of our pipeline. It's like, I ran about 1.5. Yeah. But I always hit my number and exceeded my number, and President's Club, and grew these startups because I thought, geez, I'm going to find prospects and I'm going to qualify the hell out and make sure they're worth my time. And so it was strict prioritization throughout, and I tried to train salespeople to work for me the same way as, why do we work on 10 prospects if we need to make sure we close 3? So let's work on 5. And if we ideally would work on 3 really big ones and crush our number.
Sure.
So that sort of carries over, I think, into my personal life and my entrepreneurial life, which was, we're going to prioritize on the high leverage activities and then enjoy ourselves.
His name is Andy Paul. You can find him at andypaul.com, and definitely subscribe to the Accelerate podcast. You can find it wherever good podcasts are listed, iTunes, Stitcher, you name it. Andy, as always, so good to have you on the program. Thanks for spending time with us today.
Jeff, thanks for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to talk with you.
Well, there you have it, Murphy. Just a real sort of free-flowing conversation. Sometimes when I'm doing one of these podcasts, I script all of my questions out specifically. But with Andy, I don't do it. I let the conversation just sort of go where it's going to go. But just a really, really interesting guy. And Andy's cool because he's interesting and he's intriguing. But, he's not that in-your-face style at all, right? He's an interesting cat, isn't he?
Well, and I love the way that, he approaches sales in that, it's not about he talked about the fact that you wanted to have 10 leads going at the same time. But if you won't know that only, 3 of them are actually going to be on it, why not focus on the 3, aim for 5, and when you land your 3, you've still got your numbers.
Yeah, right. And especially as it relates to what we were talking about, this idea of creativity, this idea of improv, it's not just the right solution, it's also the delivery. Well, when we think about that, if I'm only going to focus on those 3 that really matter, which is Andy's advice right there, well, what am I going to do? See, if I'm focusing on all of these different leads, then I'm going to let my CRM send out a bunch of form emails to all of these people, and there's nothing creative about it. But if I'm going to focus on those high value targets, then what am I going to do? I'm going to start looking at those targets individually and say, what do those people, how can I help that person very specifically? How can I solve a problem that they don't even know that they have? What would that look like right now? And that's where that creativity comes into place. I think too often we get into ruts, we get into routines. And look, I'm all about having a disciplined follow-up system. There's no question about it. But when I'm relying on my CRM in its entirety to do all of that follow-up for me, then I'm robbing of the opportunity to really come up with something creative, to come up with something interesting that is custom tailored to that customer. And I think that that's really what Andy was talking about. Even when we talked about the spaghetti diagram for the buyer enablement, that flow chart thing, as he was describing it, it depersonalizes the people that we are talking to every day. And if we want to have that sense of partnership and we really want to serve, then we have to look beyond just what is the next form letter that I'm going to send out. I need to look at it and say, for the customer who's standing in front of me right now, what are they not telling me? What are the messages between the lines? How can I dig deeper in order to understand them on a deeper level? And then when I do that, that's what gets the creative juices flowing. So if you're a sales professional, I want to recommend that for you today, to look at it and ask yourself the question. Just take somebody that you've been working with already and ask, boy, how can I just do a deep dive and exercise my creative muscle here for that customer? What do they need that even they don't know they need? What problem can I solve that they don't even know that they have right now? And if you look at it from that perspective, it's going to change your way of thinking. It's going to get you into that deeper idea of what can I do? What can I do to be able to provide a tremendous amount of service for that person through that creative opportunity? It's always good for us to be able to get beyond ourselves. And when we stop and we just daydream a little bit about our customers and ask, what is it that they're going through and how can I solve that problem? We're going to be so much better off. So don't just listen right now. And even if you're agreeing, don't just sit there and nod your head. Apply it to somebody. Apply it to somebody that you are working with right now. Find the creative way to solve your customer's problem. And when you do that, you'll have the opportunity to change their world.